now recording. So I wanted to introduce you guys to Alexis Martin-Vegue, who you already know from our first webinar, and she's joined by Andrea Chandler. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and then you can get started.
Oh, I thought you were just going to read our bios and make it easy.
Nope.
No?
Not easy on you, sorry.
Okay. Well, if you guys didn't come to the first, what you're calling this dressage lecture series, I am Alexis Martin-Vegue. I am a dressage trainer in Northern California, and I have my medals, and as well as trying to work my way through the judging programs, as tedious as that is. And I specialize in rider biomechanics. I have done a lot of learning from Mary Wanless, and I take that knowledge on the road and teach a lot of clinics, as well as teach it to students at home. And I mostly train Spanish horses just kind of by luck, but I have ridden things of all breeds and will take pretty much anything here in training my program. And it's of great interest to me that you develop the horse's body correctly through the right work, because I want to keep them sound as long as possible and also make sure that they are really happy. And if the horses aren't happy, I just really don't understand why anybody wants to do this. Like, it's not enjoyable to ride a tense horse who doesn't like his job, or a completely defeated horse who doesn't like his job. So it's important to me to understand how to develop their body so they can do their job easily and that they're happy to do it. So that's kind of what this talk is about. And in order to talk about it with greater accuracy and knowledge about the horse's anatomy, I begged and pleaded Andrea to come and contribute her knowledge and information. So Andrea, you want to say like a little something about who you are and why you're here, why you got suckered into this?
So I'm Andrea Chandler, also in Northern California, and I'm a massage therapist for horses and people as well, but I got into it mainly for the horses. It's an anatomy and physiology, I would say, focus type massage. So it's not just to help them relax, it actually is to restore muscle function and maybe help pinpoint some areas where they're coping or struggling a little bit. I'm also very involved with horses, have been my whole life, very involved with dressage, absolutely adhere to happy horses for any job that they're doing, essentially, so that they can have a good life with us. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
All right. So I guess that without further ado, we're gonna get into it, and everyone is gonna enjoy this like PowerPoint presentation that I made for the very first time in the middle of the night last night when I couldn't sleep. So I'm super excited about it. And even though it's right here on the screen, I'm gonna read this quote that I dug up, and it's a quote from another book, but it was quoted in a book that I cited in the resources, which is called Compassionate Training for Today's Sport Horse. And it's a book that's written by a veterinarian. I think she's Danish or German, Karen Liebrandt, I think is how you would say her name. And she's a vet as well as a dressage rider, and she's done a lot of research, both like scientifically and somewhat anecdotally with her own horses, about why it's important to ride them a certain way to develop their body correctly. But in any case, this quote is that I think ties in some of my secret message about like taking care of their emotional well-being too, and how that ties into their body. So the horse's muscles provide the earliest indications of anxiety. Muscular tonus is closely involved with variations in its psychological state. It is important to recognize that emotional equilibrium is as vital to optimum sporting performance as the physiological readiness of the underlying mechanical structures, which will not perform on command unless the horse is comfortable and confident. And I think that's a really good message, that even though we're really trying to develop the horse physically to do this, the cat's behind me, relatively demanding job in sport, and use its body in a way that, like, yes, they would do in nature, but only in really short bursts, not like sustained like we ask them to do in competitive dressage, or even just dressage for art in our own personal practice. So we can't force them physically to build the strength, they have to be emotionally confident and like mentally pliable to that to develop the right muscles. And maybe you've had a personal experience with that. Like if you have done working out or distance running or had a personal trainer, if somebody's like really hard on you and you experience a lot of anxiety about it, it just locks you up. And you're going to develop like improper physical habits as a result of the emotional anxiety and tension associated with that physical action. And you'll default to using your body in patterns that are not really healthy physically because of the emotional imbalance. So I just wanted to point that out, but the rest of this will basically be about the horse's body and not so much about how they feel about the situation. Andrea, do you have any comments about that, or is that?
I mean, other than I absolutely agree. And I think, you know, a lot of what we chalk up to training issues are physically showing up because of their mental state, right? So even horses that there's nothing specifically wrong with them, they kind of stop trying, or they're just super tight, or, you know, there are a lot of things that we can say occur because of the mental state in a physical form, right? So it's easy to feel even in the body. So
yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next, actually, I'm going to go to this next slide, but we're going to talk a little bit about a few other things before we kind of discuss what is on it. So I talked about your a little bit in reading that quote, but your horse is an athlete and you have to treat them like you're their personal trainer. And it's your job to make sure that they're happy doing the work, but it's also your job to recognize the areas of weakness and gear how you ride them and work them on the ground too, towards developing their body to fill in those holes and to maximize the potential for like their muscular strength and their collectability, hopefully, ultimately. And because of that, like that development takes a long time. So you can't just take a horse who doesn't have the body to support it and ask them to do exercises or movements that are beyond their muscular capability, even if they have been ridden regularly and look fit, because they haven't developed the type of muscles that hold them to do those exercises or certain movements. Even if they know potentially how to do them, they need a lot of repetitions of different foundational exercises to build the strength to do the movements. That being said, as you're taking that time to develop them, you're still going to encounter that it's possible that the horse experiences muscle soreness. And some of that is like where you have to decide whether their behavior is related to that discomfort, or is it weakness, and how you address that through varying your exercises and also through body work and rest. And so hopefully, Andrea, you have a little bit of insight on how people might be able to recognize if their horse is experiencing soreness, or if they're struggling because they're just weak, but they're not necessarily like painful as a result of the workouts that they're having.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that as owners or regular riders of specific horses that you can do is actually trust the kind of personality of your horse. If your horse is a very compliant horse, very honest, genuine horse that generally works hard, or at least tries, and at a certain point it kind of stops trying as hard or checks out a little bit, or with a certain movement or exercise, chances are that horse didn't automatically all of a sudden develop an evil side. They just have to check out or do something different because it's actually really hard. And people who I think train themselves athletically probably come up against this a little bit more than people who don't, right? You realize sometimes you kind of have to cater your workouts, horses as well, to be able to get to where you need to go. You can't just automatically expect to have all the pieces there and show up. So if the horse, for certain exercises, it's a novel movement that they're doing, you know, accept that it's going to be in pieces and it's going to be an effort that you want. More so, one of the things that I think is probably a little deleterious is the idea that you ride them until they give you exactly what you want. That's probably not a great physical
that's a
quality.
great point.
Yeah. And so things to look out for during your ride are changes all of a sudden in how they're responding. Or I hear a lot of people say, you know, every now and then, well, maybe every other week, they just do something. They kick out as they go into the left lead, or they just have a really hard time sitting at such and such and such and such. And if the rest of the time the horse doesn't have that same thing happening, chances are there's something going on that makes them resist that. And the only way they either can go into the movement that you're asking is by doing something more extravagant with their body to manipulate themselves so they can get it, or that they're just upset because it hurts and they're trying really hard and that's what they put out there, right? Pay attention to those habits, right? Trust your horse's personality. And then always, I know riding takes a long time, grooming and cooling out takes a long time, but just be aware of the body of your horse. There are a ton of people who have said, oh, I didn't even notice like that part of that, that divot in that muscle. I had no idea it was missing, something like that. Like just, you don't have to overanalyze everything, but just be aware, like, oh my gosh, this part seems really, really tight. It might actually be really, really tight, and so just pay attention before and after your rides. Little things on the ground manners will show up. A lot of times horses, just like people, can mentally get engaged in something. Your endorphins kick in, your adrenaline kicks in, you're thinking very hard, and you're not going to be saying like, oh, I would do that except it hurts, but you'll show it later or before, that type of thing. Yeah. So pay attention to those habits as well. The horses really try to do a good job, and so it's not going to show up in an obvious format generally.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like be paying attention to how your horse's body looks when they're just standing around relaxed, and if it helps, like take pictures on a regular basis of what they look like doing that, because it is a big indicator of like how they're developing and if suddenly something changes, because things usually change really gradually and you might not notice it if you don't have that to look back on and go, oh, was this always built like this, or was this asymmetry there? And sometimes those things are actually like easier to see in comparative photos than they are just in person, like looking at the horse. And something I'm trying to be better about with horses in my program is like taking intake pictures and then keeping up with that as they go. And I'm talking just like natural stance pictures instead of a picture of the horse working or a pose to do something, because you don't see those things as well. So looking at this slide, so now we can kind of look at this slide. I want to talk about how the exercises, like the foundational work that you do with your horse that is going to develop their musculature, and most people get really fixated on the top line, but there's a lot of other muscles in the horse that are important for them to carry and develop a beautiful top line, don't look like necessarily what a dressage test looks like. And I think it's important to recognize that even in an upper level horse, they can't go around in the outline of a Grand Prix horse in their day-to-day work. That isn't what builds the muscles that make them look beautiful when they're in that outline later. And these two pictures, I think, are just really great for educating your eye of what it looks like to actually ride your horse in balance and out to a correct connection, and then the mistaken version of where people think they are stretching their horse, and really what they're doing is creating resistance bands that build the underline of the horse and pull them onto the forehand. So hopefully everybody can look at these two pictures and know which one of those is a horse in balance that is developing its top line and core strength underline in the same way, and the other one that is getting pulled onto the forehand and developing the muscles that like brace it and hold it up because of the rider taking them down and unable to build their muscles correctly. Andrew, do you have any comments about that or those balances?
Yeah, well, actually, it was in line with something that you said. You know, you are, even if you are a beginner rider, you're still training your horse. You still have to be involved in their athleticism. And the idea of horses going around at 100% or 90% all the time is impossible, for one. That's not possible for the body to do, even for human bodies to do, right? Like with the talk of, you know, the Olympics being prolonged for another year, all these athletes are all of a sudden reevaluating everything because they can't be ready for peak performance for this long and then be there again next year. Like you have to time everything totally differently, right? And horses are the same way. You know, if every single trot that you do is your big, huge fanfare trot, your horse cannot maintain that. You know, like you have to vary things up. And in agreement with, it doesn't look like the dressage test, treating the horse as an athlete involves training that is not just test movements. You know, even if you break them up, like get very creative with your riding. There are a lot of ways to get the horse to build those muscles and to become very supple and through. And then you just show them off at a certain pattern, which is the test, right? And so don't get hung up on thinking this test, this level is what is correct, and the only thing I do is the next test, the next level. Like that's not how it goes. It's much more fluid. Training is much more fluid. Athleticism has to have a lot more give and take to it than that.
Yeah, I agree. And I struggle with like trying to teach riders that the language of like, they will be like, well, my horse has to do a shoulder in because it's in the test. And it's, you know, and that's like trick training. Not that there's anything wrong with training your horse to do tricks, but it's a developmental exercise that you're demonstrating it in the test. You're performing it to show that your horse has the strength and balance and correct development to demonstrate it, but it's not an arbitrary thing about like, oh, I have to do this because it's here in the test. Like understanding it from a deeper level of how it affects the horse's body with any movement, I think is really the key to being a super good personal trainer to your horse, and not just treating it as like, here is this pattern that I have to learn how to do so that I can try to get a good score.
Yeah, and in conjunction with that, you know, you do have to keep in mind the level of exertion that these horses are putting out throughout their time. And if cross training is hugely important, hugely important, but also, you know, there are a lot of horses that as they're going up a level or as they're learning a new something, you know, they're a little bit tired. You can tell their muscles are tired. They're not acting as into it as they were. They're not trying as hard that time. And people say, well, you know, I warm them up for 10 minutes. They can stretch long and low. That's not the same as giving your horse either a different type of a break, or when it does something that's exhaustive for that horse for that moment, and then letting it go for a while and doing something totally different. If your only breaks are, okay, I have to take a 10-minute warm up and stretch trot. Okay, I have to walk this out. That's not enough for the horse to be able to recover muscularly enough to do its job well. Yeah, or mentally, but
absolutely. So, so we talked about like this posture here, and then what I wanted to just make a short mention of, and I'm not gonna get into like a huge detailed discussion about what it entails, but I just want to point out that the way that you develop the horse to build the body that is able to biomechanically collect correctly involves correct bending. And bending, really like the right bending, is defined by the axial rotation that puts the inside hind leg under the flight path of the body so that it will compress and bear more weight when the horse's body like loads over it. And that's how you're going to strengthen the hindquarter, as well as the thoracic sling being forced to lift through the bending to create collection over time, not by shortening the neck or bringing the neck down or up, or really any direction in the vertical plane, up or down or in is not the way that the horse is going to build the muscles that will enable them to look beautiful and sitting in the collected work. The more you do that, then the more you're going to like change the shape of their body for the negative. And we'll look at some pictures of how that goes. And on that note too, one of the things that I think is a good thought to realize is when we're talking about bending and potentially like the horse's hollow side and the stiff side, if you are using your rein, if the horse has a quote unquote heavier rein, like people like to say, and your solution to trying to make that rein lighter is to make the horse lighten on that rein is by using it more, you've essentially turned it into a resistance band. Like horses like to go into pressure, right? And you're inviting them to put their muscle against the resistance of the rein that they're already choosing to put resistance into. So the more that you make the heavier rein heavier in your attempts to like supple or lighten them, then you're actually building the muscle on that side rather than equalizing them. So the better solution is for them to build strength that matches on the other side, on the hollow side, on the weaker side, rather than keep trying with all your might to have a wrestling match with them on the heavier rein. Because you may make them yield to it in the short term, but you might not feel that leading up to that, you're just creating this resistance band where they're training their body into that resistance and just getting stronger for the next wrestling match. Okay, and kind of on that note too, I know Andrea, you wanted to make a little mention of other contact issues, and I think it's kind of related that you know, the feeling in the contact of a horse who's using his body really elastically and is well developed is not one of emptiness. And if you are using the rein to like forcibly get the horse to yield and then they're empty in it, you're not developing them as like a whole horse. You're just teaching them to evade the pressure, and then they're going to build whatever muscles help them hold themselves in that evasion, rather than actually teaching them about like seeking the contact and having a relationship of the circle of the eights through it. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say about that concept?
The main thing is that, you know, I think a lot of times if you've had a struggle with something, especially as a rider, and it's felt really heavy or really unsteady, and then all of a sudden that horse kind of contorts itself in a way where you have nothing, you can be like, oh my goodness, this is what lightness is. This is when the horse is through. And so it's really, really important to, one, have people around you that you trust, that you can either chat with or that will be very honest with you and quite knowledgeable. And then two, if the horse is truly light, it should be the feeling of moving with you, not just not there. And so a lot of, I think a lot of just the idea mentally is hard for riders, for people to grasp, right? Of what is lightness. And if you don't have any connection with your horse, that's not lightness. That is that evasion. Yeah. That is that hollowing and that kind of freezing of the body to just try to capitulate to whatever, right? Yeah. And then also the idea that at some point, right, as horses learn, green horses learn, you know, or recovering horses, whatever, there is going to be, you know, some unsteadiness or some sort of, you know, contact that's unpleasant or evasive or whatever. It's just that that's not how you train it, right? Yeah. Like, they will have to learn, if they've never held their body in a certain way, they will have to learn that it's odd, but they also need to learn that they can do it and that they don't have to hold it until they're exhausted. And then they can go back to what they do know and what they're very capable of, which is that step lower, right? So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that like developing their body, just like your own body, like it's not about like, it's not static, you know, riding a horse is not doing a plank. So they have to be able to like shift and do things dynamically. And that involves like losing that balance and then regaining it, not the rider trying to hang on to a certain posture for dear life, because then the horse is going to develop movement patterns that are undesirable in their efforts to sustain it under pressure.
And again, it's physically they can't, right? Like if we were lifting weights
Yeah.
and we went from 5 weights to 25, and it's like, well, I did 20 reps with 5, so from here on out forever, I'm only gonna do 20, you know, like
Yeah.
it's too much. You
Yeah.
have to go back and forth, up and down, take a break, build your confidence again. You know, you really do have to think of it as an athletic component of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, and I think we kind of touched on it before, of just the importance of you noticing what your horse is doing and capable of, but that kind of ties into making sure that you rest them enough and vary the exercises, which you already said, and that sometimes that can be in the ride or on different days, and cross training, and then the component of body work to help you both, help the horse both understand, like be comfortable in his body and work through some of those tightness things, but also for the rider as a evaluation tool of how the development is going. Having,
Yes.
And there's so many different modalities. I know, Andrea, you can talk a little bit about like when you feel a horse's body, like the kind of information it gives you about how they're developing or where they might be struggling.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, every horse is different. Every horse is built differently. Every horse has a different training regimen and a different area of where they are. And so all of those have to be considered. So it's not, you know, black and white is not the case. Everything has a context here. And what mainly I look out for as a massage therapist is odd patterns. So every horse has a natural asymmetry, which every rider does as well. And you can mitigate it to a degree. It's never going to be 100% symmetrical, neither are we. But within that natural asymmetry, sometimes things become very off kilter, right? So if most horses are right hind dominant, which means that there's a lot of action and a lot of muscle building on that right hind. And because of that opposite diagonal pair, right, that left front also has a different building in a
picture of that for later.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how far I might be jumping ahead, right?
No, you're fine. No, good.
And so I expect that when I'm feeling a horse, you can tell what their dominant hind leg is. You can be like, of course, you know, the opposite front leg is going to be a little bit more whatever. But what sticks out are either oddly developed muscles, muscles that are singularly very taut, and then just the overall tone of the muscle, feel of certain areas of muscles, and patterns of use of muscles, right? So if a horse is very tight in one portion of its shoulder and nothing else, I probably won't go, you know, too much with it, unless it's also tight carrying just over the withers, and then just along the top part of the back, and then just in the front flexors, which are on the inside of the front leg. And what that means is that horse is trying really hard to offset weight off of that leg really quickly, and it's not using its shoulder muscle to come forward and hit the ground. It's trying to just pop off of it as fast as possible. So little things that body workers can feel. Chiropractors, of course, have a totally different realm that they're involved with. Acupuncturists, blah blah blah. Muscle tone, stringiness in muscle usually means that things are taxed a little bit, like you fatigued that area too much, and the muscle's working too hard. And you can't feel micro tearing in muscles, but you can feel large tearing or scar tissue buildup. You can feel with larger working muscles like glutes and quads and hamstrings. You can feel when those things are being overworked and they're very tired. Like the muscles themselves are just ready to have a break. They can't do it.
Yeah. And they're probably at greater risk of injury when they get to that point, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely. And there's no way. And again, if there are, I'm sure there are human athletes out there listening. There's no way that if a major muscle group is fatigued, there's no way the body's not going to default to weird muscle groups to try to continue the amount of effort that's going to be requested. And so the reason injuries can happen are not just because that muscle got fatigued and it tore, or that muscle got fatigued, it couldn't support the joint and the joint had a problem, or the tendon had a problem or something like that. It happens that these smaller muscles that are not as capable have to rally with these larger muscles to try to continue the effort, and they're smaller, so they start to do funky things. They're not capable of handling that much pressure, and that's when you get odd patterns of behavior. The horse can't support itself in a straight or through format when it's exhausted, so it starts contorting itself to try to offset where it's getting tired and weak, and if we just keep going, then yeah, it's going to exacerbate. It's a self-perpetuating cycle.
So I have and I told Andrea when we were planning this talk, I was like, this bullet point question is kind of for me specifically, because I have all these Iberian horses that are really, really easy keepers. And for the average layperson rider, me specifically, how do I identify what it feels like when the horse is building muscle versus just getting fatter? And where, I know where the normal fat deposits are, but I think they can also just get fat in other places. And I would, you might mistake that for the right development, and instead they're just fat. So is there a really easy way that somebody could be tactile and go, oh, that's definitely fat?
I think so. The easiest way tactilely would be, and you do, just like everything in life, you have to train yourself a little bit to pay attention, right? So there is a level of learning with this, but it won't be too much, right? So if you feel around on your horse, there are certain areas that should, kind of have tonicity and just kind of mush in and spring back, right? And if you feel something where you have to, and the easiest way to be is to start on a horse that is not chubby. So you know what the layers, kind of educate your hand.
I don't know if I have any of those.
You might have one.
I might have one.
Kind of educate your hand to what the tissue feels like without an inch or two of chubby on top. And then you can go to what you know is a chubby horse, right? And you push in, and it just kind of continues to sink until you hit something that is a little bit more substantial. And it doesn't have to be tight, right? But just something that's like, oh, this is the muscle. And keep in mind horses' conformation, especially with things like Iberian horses or Baroque horses or whatever, tubular shaped horses. Or more, Frisian horses, which are very different, or quarter horses, which are very different than the average warm blood, right? They will deposit their fat as well as their muscles slightly differently, and that's totally fine. One of the things that I've seen a couple times, which there's a muscle that goes just behind the shoulder on the ribs, where the saddle flap would almost cover up, and horses can gain a lot of fat there. So
somewhere in here,
but
on a deeper layer.
So horses can gain a lot of fat there, but they can also gain a lot of muscle there if their saddle fitting is poor, or if their work is not soft and through. And so if your horse looks normally very fit or not fat, but that one area starts to overdevelop, don't think your horse needs to lose weight. That's not the problem, right? However, if the horse overall, you're like, oh, it's really chubby here, and then you're like, man, it's kind of chubby everywhere, then and then, just like with dogs, a really easy thing to do is you should always be able to see the top of their spine. That doesn't change. The very top of their spine is always going to be there regardless of back muscling. To some portion or another, you shouldn't have to go inches down. But there should be, depending on the horse, it varies a little bit with the angle, but there should be some sort of either just under straight across, right? So it's never going to be that the muscle builds purely up or above the spinous processes of the vertebrae. And so it can be, especially with more Baroque horses, it can look relatively flat, but if it's actually flat, then they're probably a little chubby.
Or
their bum, the back end of their bum is another really way to see it. Like, the very top around their tail, that type of thing. So I don't know if that helps, but.
No, it totally does. It totally does, yeah. And I can usually identify that they're fat. It's just sometimes it's like, it's good to be like, well, this specific area, is this a fat deposit or is this like incorrect development? Sometimes I have a harder time with some of them, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So so we're on this slide anyway, which is kind of where we were headed with a short overview of how a correctly muscled horse will look, or correctly developed horse will look. And this picture that's here on the left, I chose because it is not a dressage horse. This is actually a race horse. This is a thoroughbred stallion. And what strikes me about this is it just kind of points out that, goes back to the idea that the exercises and the posture that are required to develop the body are not necessarily like what a dressage test looks like, or maybe what we think a upper level dressage horse looks like. So this horse obviously has never probably been asked to do anything that resembles dressage, but yet when we look at his body, I think we would probably all find it pretty pleasant in the way that the parts blend together. And he doesn't have some of the weaknesses that we're going to see when we look at some of the incorrectly developed horses because of the wrong type of riding. Could he be maybe a little bit more filled in, like through the base of his neck and in his wither in the trapezius area? Like, yes, right? But he also probably has had a tiny little person sitting on him and never been asked to stretch forward to a contact, right, to develop that more. But I just wanted to point out that this is a pretty evenly muscled horse that hasn't done the type of work that we think of with doing dressage work.
Well, and to a point of that, the back and the hind end of that horse look wonderful, right? And there are a lot of dressage horses that would love back muscling and croup muscling and, all of the quads, even those are amazing, right? Like a lot of dressage riders don't have that on their horse. And I think that also speaks to the fact that dressage is not the only thing that can do this. It's good movement that does this, right? It's true, honest, the horse is moving well, that can make that show up. And so, there was a comment that was posted that said, "Oh, but he looks lovely," because it's a racehorse, right? And that was the point. Yeah, he does look lovely, and he doesn't do dressage. Yeah,
exactly. So that's kind of what I wanted to point out, that like I'm not criticizing this horse. I think it's a wonderful horse, and it's a good example of a nice, even, harmonious development from the side view. Obviously, we don't know what he looks like from the front and the back, but we can kind of make a good assumption that he has some good things going on there too. But I think this is a nice picture of what a horse that doesn't have any glaring muscle development issues. Okay, so now I've got we're gonna look at some other photos that are from the front and the back that are gonna show, actually I think I have another side view one of the development of the horse and what they can look like with actually not very long of time. And I will point out the areas that I see that are different that have been developed in this horse, and maybe Andrea, you can identify the anatomy for us, and that might like really help people to train their eye to go to those places when they're looking at their horse. So this is a young horse. This is a 4-year-old that I started, and in this first picture on the left here, she'd been under saddle for maybe 2 weeks. I'm not sure, not that long. And you can see that she's pretty like straight through the back of her butt here. And there's just not a lot going on in this area in the engine. And you can just faintly see the point of her croup and the point of her hip. And she looks pretty hollow next to the wither. And her neck shows that you can see that the muscles of the neck look really like ropey and stringy. And she looks a little bit too built up here where the second vertebra is. And some of it is just the way that she's standing. This is a horse with a very poor to average neck, but she's come a long way. And the other interesting thing to notice is that her expression is just a little bit like checked out, where with more time and work in the second picture, her expression is much brighter and alert and just naturally looks more engaged with the world. And I just think that is something just to notice about horses in general. Like they, you can change them in a lot of ways by developing them correctly physically. So the big differences are, for me, are the shape of the hindquarter overall, right? She looks like she got another 2 inches of booty, like she had butt implants put back here and much more filled in here, right? She did. And then the same thing here with her, with this whole, I know that like the superficial part of this, right, is the trapezius in here. And this is all much smoother and filled in, and the neck does not look stringy and kind of disconnected. The other thing about this picture is it makes, her head look extremely large relative to her body. And when you look at her here, she looks much more in balance as a result of the evenness and the filling out of muscle. And she isn't really any fatter. I just wanted to point that out, that like she's in about the same body condition in terms of her, like her weight. So Andrea, do you want to like give me some technical stuff for what is happening in the hindquarter and identify like the names of those structures so that we are really clear on what's developing?
Yeah. First there was a question that said, what kind of work is she doing?
She was a baby, so she got started in her saddle by me, which I do in-hand work and lunging for a month to 6 weeks before I back them. And she had about, I don't know, 8 to 10 rides in the round pen, walking and trotting, before I started walking, trotting, and cantering her in the arena. And in my program, the young horses, they have the freedom basically to use their head and neck for balance like they're supposed to, for more like the better part of the first 6 months to year of their training. So I will ask them with a light contact, but allow them to use their head and neck for balance how they choose. And so this is how she's developed with that work, with in the beginning like 3 days a week of riding, and then as she got further along in her saddle with 4 and then 5 days a week of riding. And this the second picture here was taken just a couple days ago. So
and then also if you so I'll say this with a disclaimer, right? So generally when you would see this much change in the hind end, you would see a different neck. And the neck that Alexis is talking about is not just like, oh, it's placed horribly, you know, like
it also has a defect. Yes.
Yeah. So there is a reason that she doesn't have like a much bigger stallion neck, other than just like, oh, she has not a great neck. Like, you know, there are some poor neck placements on horses, but that's not necessarily the case with this. With the work that she shows over her back and her hind end, as well as some other places, like you would, if she wasn't compromised in this area, she would have a filled out neck. So that's I just wanted to put that out there so people aren't like,
why isn't the neck? Yeah. So just for this horse has a slightly fallen crest, which is a like genetic defect, and so it really affects you know, how they can develop. And the more muscle she develops, then the better it's going to look, and the less that's going to be apparent. But I think it's going to take her longer to put that on than it would on a horse with a more standard model neck. Yeah.
Well, Alexis, have you just kind of want to run like your cursor over the areas that you're speaking of? And
I was like the back of the butt here.
So the horse has 3 hamstrings, and the one that's providing that nice little silhouette at the very back is called the semitendinosus. You'll see it really well developed all the time on quarter horses, just because they get genetically endowed. And you'll see it a lot of times, most thoroughbreds as well, because they usually come off the track and they usually have so much just pushing, right? With pushing their hind end. What you will notice, and then the top part of her bum, right? That's going to be where her glutes are, as well as where the hamstrings start. So they do start very high up on the horse. But I would like to point out, if you can bring your cursor to kind of the stifle area. So the horse in the 10 months under saddle, right, she almost looks more compact. And the reason she looks almost more compact is not because she changed shape, but because she gained abs and quads. And so sometimes when the horse gets abdominals, they look, not that their belly is bigger, but that their line on the bottom is a little straighter. And that's because the abdominals kind of come from underneath the belly, but they connect up into the flank area. And so it starts to fill in that flank. And then also the quads are on the back side of that flank, really deep. And you can see it even almost makes her stifle look larger because she has more muscling around that knee. And so it just kind of fills out that whole picture a lot better. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, she grew into her body, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely turned into a much more elegant being. And for the sake of her owner, I decided I was not going to share the before any work picture because it was not flattering, and it was before she knew how to, stand in hand or anything. So I wanted to not put that in there. Okay, so we'll go. So now, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, in regards to what you're talking about behind the withers, yes, the traps and the rhomboids are much more filled in. But what also starts is right up near the scapula, just underneath. Yep, right around there. That's actually where their back muscling begins. And so it does kind of go along their back, like you would think, but then the spine takes a curve as it goes under the shoulder blade. Yeah, and so that back muscle also has to start to curve underneath. And so all of those areas are nicely filled up.
And that I'm assuming that is part of what's responsible for making the horse wider in the front as they get more built up.
That is part of it. The other part is actually, which I think you have some chest pictures coming up.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. The other part is that they don't have a clavicle like we do, but they have a large pectoral shoulder girdle, and those are utilized in a way that also expand that. So it's not just the pecs that we think of at their chest. And I'll talk more about it, I guess, when we get to that.
Yeah. So we'll go to the next one. So, and this is just another side by side of a different horse with a longer span of time. So on the left, and unfortunately this picture got a little stretched when I was cramming it into here. So she actually is not quite that long. It just got a little bit stretched when I was like making it fit on the template. So, so that is her as a 4-year-old. And then the picture on the right is 4 years later and also fatter. Fatter, but also more, but she's actually not that fat right now. So she's lost a little bit of weight. She's 10 now, so that this picture is a little bit older. But you can see a lot of the same types of development. I know it's a riding picture. You can't tell as much because I didn't have anything of her with nothing on her. But you can see the same areas that have developed. And despite the picture being stretched, you also get that same feeling of that she looks a lot more compact now that she has developed those abs and changed the angle of her hindquarter and developed that muscle at the back of the hindquarter that makes her look like shorter coupled.
Yeah, and this will tie into the chest pictures as well. Speaking of what makes that shoulder girdle a little wider looking, but the 8-year-old picture, the underside of the neck, like the neck overall is just significantly wider, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would like to, that I've seen show up more often, I think, is the idea that the horse should have zero development in the underside of their neck, which is actually not true. That part of their neck is very much used as part of a springboard, as well as the ability to hold it up and give that nice arched look. So if the horse has no thickening down there, then they're actually still not holding themselves correctly, right? If they're holding
they just
themselves
they collapse. They would just kind of collapse downwards and come behind the vertical.
And so it's the thickening. It's a different look than the horse bracing, right, with the underside of the neck and the overdevelopment of the underneck. That's not what this is. That actually shows just a nice, the horse's head is super heavy. They have to do a lot of pushing off the ground. We want suspension. And therefore that is going to come into play. It should develop. It just shouldn't be braced. or overly developed?
Okay. The last little bit got cut off on my end. I don't know if everybody else was able to hear it or not, Andrea, that like the audio cut out for a second, but hopefully. I think the gesture got the impression.
All right, I think so.
So now, yeah, so we'll go to the, now we have some pictures from the front, and the one on the left is the same gray mare that we saw in side profile, and then the one in the middle is the now 10-year-old mare. This is a more recent picture. I just took this picture, and then the one on the far right is my Grand Prix horse, who is not really in Grand Prix work at the moment. He's mostly just kind of, you know, playing and just renegotiating the contract and just generally being a cool guy. So, but and the pictures are not taken at exactly the same distance, so you can't like look at them as a side-by-side comparison and go, this horse is built up this way, because the picture of Gooey of the chestnut is taken from slightly farther away. And I'd also like to point out that you can see his cute little really long whiskers hanging down in this picture, and I left that there on purpose. So anyway,
that his bar name is Gooey.
His bar name is Gooey because he's amazing. So what stands out to me in these, if you compare the shape and the space in this, and I'm down here at the bottom of the 5-year-old, of the arch between the front legs of each of the horses, you can see that it gets progressively more open with more training and development, right? And some of that is it, and all of these horses are pretty much old enough that the like maturation isn't a huge deal. The 5-year-old probably has a little bit more to go in terms of like actual growth. So some of that will be different when you see like a yearling versus a 4 or 5-year-old. Like the yearling looks like it has like a sawhorse, you know, that both the legs come out the same opening. But at this point at 5 years old, like that's not what's going on here. Is that you are developing them through those deeper muscle layers that lift the forehand, and so create this width that you see. And the other thing that you can see is that the shape on the outside of the shoulders becomes just, this is a little bit more sloping, and the shape of the base of the neck is narrower. And as you kind of get up the levels, as it were, it's wider up here to go with the width down at the bottom, and the neck is wider relative to the shoulders as they develop that neck lifting and carrying and attachment of the neck to the shoulder, which kind of helps prevent the wrong kind of bending. So when the horse doesn't have a really good attachment between the neck and the shoulder, it kind of allows the neck to be a little bit too mobile, and then you can get the kind of bending where the neck turns and then the shoulders are pointed the other way. And that is not going to develop the carrying power of the hind legs when you're displacing the neck from the body mass. And it's really easy for young horses to do that because they don't have all this muscle here. So that's, for me, why it's really important to let them use their neck for balance and to ride them pretty straight and not let the neck get noodling all around, because then they're just like disengaging this and not building this attachment. Andrea, is there some areas and I'll just point out, just because I noticed it and it's here and we can talk about it when we talk about asymmetries, that my little I1 horse here has a really interesting like pec asymmetry left and right that I hadn't really noticed before. And maybe Andrea could talk about like why that might be, because from me riding her all the time, I would say this is one of the most even left and right bending horses and like symmetry of work horses that I've ever ridden and developed. So it's kind of surprising to me when I took this picture. I was like, whoa, if your pecs always looked like that, when did that happen? Or any other comments that you want to make about the shape of the front end from the front?
No, I think you nailed the shape. Good job.
Okay.
So in regards to the intermediate horse,
Yep.
it's not going to necessarily, it could, affect if she was significantly, one-sided, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily bespoke that, right? So the pecs, they have a number of them, and actually there's kind of, there's always debate in anatomy as far as what things are called or where exactly the separation of one muscle to another muscle lies. So
yeah.
so if you don't agree with the terminology and you're an anatomy expert, that's the disclaimer there, right?
Yeah.
But the main ones that we're going to be looking at for that area are going to be actually the one that starts near the shoulder and at the base of the neck, called the deep anterior pec. And what that does is it starts at the top of the scapula, kind of follows the front of the shoulder, and then it cuts down and it goes really deep inside into the sternum.
Okay.
And then there are other sets of pecs actually on the chest. One that have fibers that come across the chest sideways, and the other ones that have fibers that come long ways under the chest and into the belly, right?
Okay.
And so one of the things is the development that I was talking about before of the springboard of the horse. The reason they have to have not bracing of the neck, but some muscle there, and the reason that their chest starts to look like this is because as we increase movements and as we increase suspension and delicacy of transitions, right, they really have to hit the ground, sink into it, and push off of it. And what you're going to see is different ways of how they're going to handle that. And again, every horse is slightly asymmetric. And so they're going to be able to push off of one thing a little bit harder or not as hard than the other thing. And it doesn't mean that the hind end and the back aren't compensating well. It's just that that's how their body is built, and it's whatever, right? The other thing that comes into play here is the front flexors. So the front flexors are very high up, which I don't know if you want to put your cursor kind of in the middle of her lower line of her chest, right?
Okay.
And then if you drag it to one of the legs, so all the way down towards the bottom, sorry.
Okay, like down here.
Hang on, technical. And then there's the lay, right? I don't know if I can see. Yeah. And then drag it towards her left leg.
Okay.
So that would be her right. So drag it to the left.
Her left leg.
There we go. I know, it's a video, right?
Yeah.
And so what you have is you start dragging it towards her left leg. You have pectorals, and then as it attaches to the inside of the front leg, you have a meeting of muscles, a group of muscles called front flexors. And the pectorals do come down, right, and attach. They are separate muscles, but fibers interact with each other. They don't completely disconnect. So the front flexors start to come up from the inside of that leg, and they both have this kind of meeting area right there as it goes underneath the scapula, very deep, which we're not gonna be able to see.
Way in there.
Yeah. And so what can also happen is with that natural asymmetry, not only is there a difference in how much one front leg is going to springboard off of the ground and absorb the ground and have to push off a little harder, but there's also a difference naturally in just how much the horse has to collapse that knee to make both sides even, right? Because of, again, a natural asymmetry. So the front flexors and those pectorals are going to develop a little differently as they get higher in work. They're both developing. They're just not necessarily going to be
at the same rate.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And you'll see it, if you can look at World Cup videos, and every horse has a passage where one front leg is a little higher than the other, or, they're still working evenly. They're still doing well. It's just, it's just a natural muscle building component that it's hard work. It's hard.
Okay. So now we will look at butts, because butts. Let's look at their butts. There we go. Okay. Who doesn't want to look at butts? Okay. So and dirty horse butts. These are not clean horse butts. So we have the same three horses, and again with the disclaimer that they are not taken at the perfectly same distance from the horse butt. And so, so you can't compare them from a size standpoint because they're not being taken at the same relative distance. So, and also that I don't think any of them are standing perfectly square. So there's a little bit of a look of like one hind leg low down, like Gaskin might be bigger than the other, but it really is just because they're not standing perfectly square behind, so it's closer to the camera. The areas that I think are really interesting when you talk about like the, as the horse develops up the levels, is that even though in this really nicely shaped 5-year-old that she's, you know, quite filled in and round up at the top, she does have the look of getting narrower as she goes down. Like the widest part of her is somewhere over here, and she does get narrower. And then that's correlated to this angle here is fairly steep. And then when you compare to the horses that have done more collective work, you start to get this rounding and curved area here and much more width between their butt crack and like the outside edge of the hindquarter, and a look of it being like pretty straight down. When we look at Gooey, and he's a much differently built horse than either of the girls, and he's just much steeper through the top of his hindquarter, and he's kind of always looked that way. But we do see the same like straightness through here rather than that like narrowing in. And he also has quite a bit of width across the bottom of the hindquarter. And then he has, I was going to point out his asymmetry here that you can see in the difference in the angles in the top of his croup on each side. He actually had a really severe accident in the pasture where he had really bad nerve damage that caused this whole hindquarter to waste away. He looked like a dairy cow on this side when it happened. And so this is the residual of that we've never been able to get this to totally fill back in compared to the other side, which didn't have the wasting. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing to point out on him. So maybe Andrea, you could talk about what muscle it is in here that fills in and gets wider as they start to carry more weight behind and do the collected work, just some of these structures as we're looking at them from the back instead of from the side now.
Sure. So as you start from the inside of the hind legs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. What you have are a few different things going on. The innermost hamstring, which is called the semimembranosus, runs into there. And it absolutely acts a bit as an adductor. And then your adductors also, not yours, the adductors also are in the inside of that butt cheek, right?
Okay.
And so as your horse, 1, sits more, and then 2, does more lateral work, and then 3, turns tighter, what happens is the inside muscles start to develop as they should, right? They have to support the entire weight as it moves, as one leg moves towards the midline to do different things that at different moments in a movement or in a gait has to support the entire weight of the horse at different times, right? And so they need to develop those to be able to properly do that work. I will say there are horses that have those inside muscles and very well developed, but they don't have the outside muscles of the butt cheek very well developed. And that is a sign of a horse that is a bit compensating, right? So if a horse is trying to bring a hind leg or both hind legs on either direction towards the midline, they're trying to support their weight a little bit better. They're trying to bring their legs under their body and not necessarily sit as well if they don't have those outside kind of nice square butt cheek muscles as well, right? Okay. And so what you're looking at there are going to be a bit, the front portion of it, you're looking, or the part that's towards the horse's head, right? You're looking a bit more as the quads. The quads kind of come down at a weird angle and they tie in, right? So you'll still see the quads on the outermost side of that. But you'll also see the hamstring development. And the hamstring that you see first is going to be what's called the biceps femoris, and it's used, it technically starts at the top of just behind the glutes, and it does go over the hip joint, the trochanter joint. So it still is used a bit like a glute muscle. so it can develop oddly in the sense where it will develop only at the top portion and not at the lower portion if the horse is, again, not moving truly in their work, or not sitting very well for an injury, or something like that. When it's fully nicely developed, like it is on this on the middle mare here, then it fills out that nice square side, right? As you move inward, you have 2 more hamstrings. And those carry down into, as well as the biceps femoris, the hamstring I just spoke of. Those carry down into the outside of the kind of like the gaskin area, which is going to be where their calves are. And so,
it's easier to see in this picture.
yeah, you can put it up, exactly, on the gray area.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be their equivalent of our calf muscles. And so it should all develop outwardly as well, right? If you just have the one inside development, they're compensating. If you have it obviously one-sided, then they're compensating. But it should be a nice square package as they develop. It should have both the inner and the outer rim.
No, I think that's like really important to know, because I actually didn't really know that. Because I just see butts basically come like this. So I haven't seen one that has, just the inside development. But that's really interesting.
Yeah,
These
and
are the butts I know.
A note on your stallion there. I just wanted to speak to again, horses are not machines. Things happen, and there are imperfections and accidents and asymmetries that sometimes can be pretty egregious, and sometimes you cannot overcome them. But a lot of times you can. And I think he's probably an amazing example, right? Like, it's not perfect, but the horse is high level work, and he's pretty okay, like he does it. And so while the horse can have some, some severely limiting things, it doesn't mean that they don't want to try and that they can't recruit other muscles and to help them in that physical journey. It may end up looking asymmetrical, but if you know that that's the reason and that they're going well, that means it's correct, right? That's just imposing. And so when you look at a horse point blank and know nothing about it, like if I saw that horse and knew nothing about it, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like somebody needs to do something, right? Like that butt needs to be more rounded at the top. But you know what? Actually, it's amazing what he's doing. Like, that's awesome. And so keep in mind that if your horse has a weakness or a limitation, you don't have to necessarily give up unless it's something that they really can't overcome. But then also keep in mind, as we look at other people's horses, we don't know their story, and sometimes they are an amazing image of what has happened in life. So
there you go. I really actually wish that I had some pictures of what it looked like at the peak of its wasting, because it was unbelievable. He looked like a completely different horse from one side to the other. And none of the vets had really seen much anything like that. They were like, how did that even happen? It's crazy. And the muscle dropped off in like the span of like 2 days. It was insane. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's wild.
I know. Okay, so I can't remember what's on the next slide. Okay, so we're gonna, we're talking about correct development of the horses and what you can look for. So we're gonna do a little looking at some incorrect developments and where they will build muscle or not build muscle when they are ridden with what some classical dressage people really love to throw out is the precipitous lateral vertical flexion, which is just over flexing of the neck. Precipitous vertical flexion. So too much of that, and you will develop some interesting patterns in the body. And in order to help people to better see what those look like, I put this little skeletal diagram of the neck, because I think it's important to know that, like, this horse's ears are kind of in a weird spot. Like, most of our horses' ears are more up where the pole is. I don't know about your horse, but my horse's ears are not like attached to his forehead. They're up here where the pole is. So this is the pole. Like, this is the highest point that we're talking about on the skull, right? The pole is not on the neck; it's on the skull. And I think that's sometimes I think people don't know that the poll is a part of the skull. It's yeah. So there, and then this is the second neck vertebrae, and the shape of it can lend itself to already, even if the horse hasn't built the muscle up, to creating this arch that doesn't belong in the neck. Like it will make an arch that isn't even as the neck goes on because it's pushing up higher than the pole.
Yep.
And then if you do that long enough from that precipitous vertical flexion, you will build a bulge of muscle here over it, or maybe it's both muscle lag and irritation, inflammation of the tissue from it being pushed up in a way that it isn't really supposed to or designed to, I guess you could say. And so you will see that development. So when we look at some of these pictures, you will you'll be able to see that. And these little arrows, I think, are all part of the different supporting musculature of the neck. But I thought this is just a simple one of just the vertebrae and stuff. And an interesting thing that isn't in this diagram, but you can also envision it, is that the horse has salivary glands that run in this area, as well as their masseter muscles, their chewing muscles. And if you overly compress this with that flexion, you're going to make it so the horse can't like evacuate those glands well, and they will develop like muscularly over time. And if they have a big bulging area here where the partoids are, it's because they have been asked to carry themselves with the head too compressed back to the neck, and causing over time for them to not be able to clear the glands the way they're supposed to, and then it develops that muscle around it. So if you see that, then you will have an indication that that's happening. Okay, so this is just a picture, a stock photo where you can pretty clearly see that second vertebrae bumping up, and it doesn't look like this rider is like pulling the horse there, but it's kind of an indicator that in one way or another he or she has been ridden in such a way to kind of develop this area.
Yeah, and I wanted to speak to the idea of Baroque breeds or stallions, or those types of horses that have thicker necks. A lot of times people are like, oh, well, some horses just have it. And it's true. Stallions do have bigger necks, and Baroque breeds have thicker necks. Morgan's very cresty, right? Like all of those things can happen. But what you can see very clearly displayed in this photo, right, is that it doesn't flow into the head naturally. And that would be a way to pick out for, your own self-education, or just to take a look at your horse or whatnot. Is that it should have a nice line along the entirety of the neck, including as it attaches to the pole. And so the fact that that pole area is fairly void all of a sudden is a nice little kind of insight into the horse works with its head a little bit at that third vertebrae.
Yeah. Okay, so we will go to the next one. I can't remember exactly what I have. Okay, so this is two different horses. I know they kind of look the same, but it is two different horses, both that were in my program. And this first one here on the left is a horse that came to me after being ridden. Basically, he was taught that, like, the bit is dangerous and painful, and one should do everything in their power to not touch it in any way, shape, or form, because it will induce pain and discomfort. So he came with his chin glued to his chest because of improper riding and like a lot of fear and anxiety. And so you can see, while he doesn't have this huge bulge here because he's a relatively young horse, and I don't think he had time to develop that, the muscle of the neck looks overly defined through here and like stringy and tube-like rather than like smoothly blended. And the other thing I don't have a picture of him from the front, but you can see that he really does look wider here than he might be if you were to put your hands on either side of his neck in front of the shoulder, right? Like there's a lot more substance up here than here. And that is from that posture, like from him supporting his head curled in up against his chest. He had to build this muscle up to do that. And then you'll see that he has this hollow here behind the shoulder blade at the wither, and he's relatively like light in these areas that we looked at the gray mare where she looked pretty built up. And I don't remember how long he had been with me at this point, but and he didn't stay long enough for me to really remodel him. And so then the horse on the right is actually his half brother, but and they have slightly different conformation, and the posture of this picture isn't so great. But this horse did not have that riding history. He had a totally different riding history, and you can see that his neck looks much more smooth and not stringy or ropey or tubular, and he's smoother, filled in behind the shoulder and into a back that is more level and filled in. And the same thing with the area of the elbow, and this is a crappy picture from my phone. I have a better picture of him and the stifle area is much rounder and fuller here. And you can't see his hindquarters, so I won't comment on that. But I think this is a pretty good example of some similar horses, similar builds that you can kind of go, oh, okay, that's, this is the, and the other thing maybe that Andrea might comment on that goes back to the underline is like too weak here. There's no strength that helps him support and hold his head up and out.
And also, on that same note, if you look at the horse in the second picture, now given his head is up, right, and he's looking at something.
Yeah.
So their neck is automatically more flexed. But what you were talking about, how the neck looks smoother, what that is if you look at just the very middle of the neck, the meaty part of the side of the neck, right? That is filled in with muscle. And there are different layers of muscle, a very superficial one, but there are lots of layers as you go in. And those also are part of that connective structure of being able to support their own body weight up front without you doing it or without them having to contort themselves oddly. So if a horse is, let's say you're not sure that the top line looks maybe good to you, they have a saddle on, you can't see the back, blah, 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 who knows, right? But if the very middle of their neck is quite hollow, they're missing some filling in there. Like that should be filled out. It should be a natural progression.
You can kind of see that like through here. It just disappears in this area, right? It just gets lost in here. There's not much going on.
And the other thing that I will say too, just as a nice correlation of how the horse works as a unit, right? It's not pieces, is so the lumbar back of this horse is actually pretty well developed, but you see right as you know, that hip starts to taper down over the top, it drops fairly precipitously for how muscular the horse is. Now, sometimes that is just conformation and how they're built, right? And certain breeds have more of a propensity for that. Yeah. But a lot of times horses that have an overdevelopment in that third vertebrae, or if they're evading the bit regularly, you will see a very strong lumbar in the back and not so much at the top part of those hamstrings. And it's just because they have to disconnect their neck a little bit when they're moving from their hind end. It's not through essentially, but and so the horse exactly, the top of those hamstrings, you would expect them to be a little more filled out when you look at the shoulder, right? And again, sometimes conformation, that's just how it is, but it's a pattern that is at least noteworthy. So
Okay, and so then this is just a few more examples, improperly developed for one reason or another. This is the only photo of a horse that I actually knew. The other ones are not horses that I knew. They are just stock photos. So the same kind of things going on. This is really dark, so it's hard to tell, but there is quite a bit of muscling here and really not much going on through this part of the neck. And then she has the same development pattern in the hindquarter that Andrea was just talking about. We're built up in the lumbar and then very steep here and not enough going on there. And so when you look at this hindquarter, you could kind of look at it detached from the front of it and imagine that you would see this neck going with it. right? Like they kind of go together, and you kind of see it in here as a sort of a dark picture that she has a pretty significant dip in front of the wither too, to go with the lack of general support muscle at the base of the neck. This horse over here, do I need to move this out of the way? I don't know if you guys see it on your screen or not.
No, you're good.
Okay, so this, it helps me to be able to see it. So this horse over here has a pretty extreme version of like all of these issues going on, right? Where the neck looks really stringy and ropey and probably pretty built up here, and then nothing going on in the trapezius, and then built up in the lumbar area. And I think also what is interesting is, my guess is it makes this horse look a lot longer in his body than he maybe actually is, or what, if it was developed differently, would appear. I don't think this is like a 100-mile long horse. It just looks that way because of the way the muscle has been laid on. And you can see the kind of same things going on with this other dark stock photo. What I thought was more significant about this horse is he really looks like he has just no back built up at all. And I don't know anything about this photo. It's just a stock photo that I grabbed. And that could be related to improper saddle fit. But then he also has some of this loss back here too. So it could be a combination of a saddle fit issue along with the like incorrect riding, that he's not using his hindquarters to reach and lift up in the back and seek the connection. I don't know if you want to comment on any of those. I think that's just giving more opportunities for people to try to develop their eye on what those things look like.
Yeah, I think all of those, like the hollowness and the meat of the neck, like, I think all of the patterns, and if you need us to repeat them, we can, but all of those patterns are very evident, I think, in these. So, yeah.
Okay, and let's see. It's kind of fun because I can't remember all the slides because I'm like, when did I do this? So these pictures are a little bit hard to see just because the color of the horse, but what I was trying to show was that he has this like a saddle-shaped line here in the muscle from the saddle not fitting properly, and this is actually the lesser version of it because the saddle now fits and he's been filling this area in. And then when you look at the right side of the back, it actually looks pretty smooth. There's not a divot right here. So this is it's hard to tell because of the dirt and the color of the horse, but there's actually like a little indentation right here, like a saddle-shaped indentation, a panel of the saddle-shaped indentation. And on this side, it's just smooth, goes into the body without there being that little ledge. And so I don't know if Andrea, if you have a comment on that happening and why that would happen, or just something to notice if you see that coming on in your horse. It's more likely a saddle fit issue than it is a work-related issue.
Well, actually, I think it could be work related or even pain related from a different thing. I see that pattern from other things as well. And that's not the only way saddle fit shows up. I do, obviously you know that, but I want to make sure other people know that as well. So saddle, and I will say this as my one my one soapbox is that if you don't have a whole lot of money, get a saddle that fits and keep it fitted. Like that is a huge gift for your horse, and it can help you through so many training problems or pain problems. Like if you have to put your money somewhere, keep your saddle fit. And some horses are insanely stoic, and I've seen horses with the saddle literally sitting on top of the withers, and they jump 3 and 4 feet, and that is so sad. And they do it, and they're like,
well, look at all the old saddles from like from like the early 1900s. The gullet is like this wide, and the panels, I don't know what they're stuffed with, like cement or something, and then the horse just like wet, I don't know. So that's really good advice. There are definitely a lot of other things that the improperly fitting saddle can cause over time, and I might also add to that like some of it might not be from a pressure point so much like this as it is that the horse is uncomfortable, so he moves his body in a way to avoid the discomfort, and then as a result has improper muscle development because of the movement that he's doing to avoid the discomfort, not necessarily from the pressure right in that spot per se.
I will say specifically pertaining to, you know, the shelf that you were talking about, which again, it is a little hard to see on this picture. Because gray horses are hard to see some definition in, but on photos. But so that the shelf, what it would look like on another horse, if you can't see it here, is, you know, you can see the top of the spine, and it kind of dips down until, like, moving to the side until you get to the rib cage, and then all of a sudden the rib cage kind of springs out. And if you see, that's that ledge kind of, and if you see the ledge from the rib cage to the top of the spine, there can be a number of things, but that's generally never normal. So something is either hurting or inhibiting or that type of thing. It usually isn't.
Extremely underweight. That would be
extreme underweight can do that.
They're like really, really, really thin.
Extreme underweight can do that. But it's, the horse is really holding themselves awkwardly to not mobilize that area and build muscle. And so that would be the point, right? Is that something, stifle issues are a big one. Something is preventing that area from being mobilized and having muscle. That's normal.
Okay, so this is, I don't know why I put this at the end. I should have put it like sooner. So this is the development, like the standard kind of asymmetrical development of a hollow right horse from above. And I think it's kind of fun to look at because you can see how much bulkier this left shoulder looks in relation to how like sloping and straight the right shoulder is. And it's probably harder to tell from this angle, but we can kind of make an assumption that the horse is a little bit more filled in through the right side as a result of that, because the big part of being hollow right is that displacement of the right hind and using that differently, and then pushing the weight onto the left front. And that's how you kind of get the body to look like that, which most of them do to a certain degree. And so you have to do work that neutralizes them and doesn't use this potentially heavier left rein as a resistance band and encourage them to build this up more. I don't know if it needs any other commentary, but I just thought it was a cool picture. This is also a photo from Karen LeBrant's book, which I have in the resources here. So I think that comes to the end, and I have a couple pages of resources here, and then I realized after the fact that you guys can't click on these links because it's screen sharing. So I'm just gonna go through them really fast. So there is, and if anybody wants it, I can give you I can email the document to Megan or something, but there's a free online horse anatomy book basically, and there's a ton of text on it that is very textbook-like that you're probably not going to want to read through, like the names of all the muscles and the attachments and blah 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 blah, but it has a bunch of diagrams of the individual muscles and stuff, and I can share that with people if they want to look at it. The other one is a website that also I have the resources of the books that they have written. It's a pair of ladies, and I can't think of what their accreditation is, but they have a business that they call Horses Inside Out, and some of you may have seen it where it was in the first slide, where they paint the structures on the horse, and then they have several books, and so they're really pretty books and they're easy to follow. I disagree a little bit with the posture of some of the horses in the books, that are demonstrating dressage and stuff. I'm like, well, the horse shouldn't really go like that, but they give you an idea of maybe what some of those muscles look like in motion. This other website, sustainabledressage.net, is a great site that has tons of articles and information, detailed information about how the horse's body develops correctly or incorrectly because of the type of riding, and also gets really further into what different gadgets will do to the horse's muscle development as well. Always with the caveat of use properly or improperly. There are ways to use training aids without them doing that, but you have to really know what you're doing to do that. And then Equitope Center has a lot of Karen LeBrant's work on there in terms of webinars and courses and content. I am also on here demonstration riding for the Dr. Gerd Hauschman course, and he is a veterinarian and a barrator who has written several books, and I have his books in the links also, and he talks a lot about the horse's biomechanics and the development of the horse through its correct use. This one, because it's a really long link and everything, but Euro Dressage is a website that just has a lot of contemporary articles, but they have old articles too, and that is where I was able to dig up this article by Carl Mikulka, who was he like the SPS director or something like that at one point, Andrea?
So he was a chief writer, yeah.
Okay, Spanish writing school, yeah. So, and it's a really well-written article, and it does actually, without using, I think, the term resistance band, talks about how developing the neck of the horse involves, filling them out to the empty rein, not trying to supple them on the rein that they are heavy on, and the anatomy of the horse's neck and how it develops over time. So it's a really well-written article. And then just because of the shameless plugging, I'm trying to develop more educational content. And so and you should also subscribe to Megan's YouTube channel if you haven't done that already too, because she's the one putting all these lectures on and deserves a lot of credit for the organization and sitting through all of them live too. So that's that. So you can just search my name on YouTube and subscribe to my channel, and hopefully there'll be something interesting on there in the foreseeable future. So the books that I mentioned, Compassionate Training for Today's Sport Horse, and Karen LeBrant is her name. And this is two different books, Balancing Act and Collection versus Contortion, are both written by Dr. Hauschman. And they also have really good diagrams and photos in them. And then this is just one of the books that the Horses Inside Out people have put together, Jillian Higgins and Stephanie Murray. They have several others, ones like How Your Horse Moves and something about your horse's core. So those are other ones that have like pretty pictures. It might make a better correlation between what the muscles look like on the inside and what the outside of the horse looks like. So that, I think, is kind of everything. I don't really have a special closing statement. Andrea, do you have anything that you want to say as a
No.
extra? And if anybody has questions, we will be happy to answer a couple questions. We don't want to keep you guys here for like forever and ever and ever. But yeah, if anybody has any like specific questions, or Megan, you want to like corral or ask anything or make a comment, then that's good too.
Yeah, that was amazing. I feel bad for my horse tomorrow because I'm going to get bothered him a lot.
Oh,
Dissect his muscle like development and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was awesome. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, the chat is there, and then I assume that you guys would be okay with anyone reaching out to either of you with any individual questions they can think
Sure.
of kind of later on.
Yeah.
And so yeah, because I know that we end up having a fair amount of people watching afterwards, and so
Yeah, and like I said, Megan, I can email you the document that has their resources on it. So if people want that, we could put it on the Facebook page. Like you could just attach it to the thing, because it for the links it might be better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm really looking forward to watching it again. Oh, here we have a question from Teresa.
Let's see. How do you pick a good saddle fitter? I keep moving to areas that don't have a lot of resources, and it's a struggle to find a good one. That is a really good question. I don't know that I have like the perfect answer to that. I would say that there are a couple of like associations, organizations that certify saddle fitters that you can try to look to their resources. I can't think off the top of my head of like what the name of the one that I'm familiar with is, but that would be a good place to look, because it's important to, I think it's important to make sure that you are recognizing the distinction between like a saddle brand representative and an independent fitter who has been trained to fit saddles, not somebody who maybe has a short education by the brand of saddle that they're representing, but they aren't actually really trained as a fitter. They're just trained enough to try to sell those specific saddles. I'm not saying that there aren't good people who represent just one kind of saddle, but I would be a little bit leery of somebody who that all they do is they are representative. And I'm more likely to go with somebody who is an independent saddle fitter that has been certified by one of the saddle fitting organizations. And then they may also happen to represent a brand or two of saddle, but primarily their function is fitting. If you want, the person that I use doesn't live in this country just yet, and you can find her on the Equitopia website, and her name is Georgie Welge. I can put it in here, and she is the certified independent fitter, and I think she does a great job, as well as provides a lot of educational content on the Equitopia site about saddle fitting. You know, educating yourself enough so that you would know what to look for when somebody comes out as a fitter. Then that's a really great way to be sure that your fitter actually knows what they're doing. And you can use some of those like resources on Equitopia to watch some of Georgie's videos about like, this is what it should look like when the fitter comes out. Because if they don't do some of those things, then you go, okay, maybe this person doesn't really entirely know what it is that they're doing. And listen to your horse. Like if the horse is like, I hate this, then you know. And you can spend a lot of money having reps come out for saddles and having your horse be unhappy with it. So having an independent fitter who is going to look at that and not just try to sell you this specific saddle is, I think, a really good place to start. But yeah. Andrea, do you have any comments on that? Do you have a recommendation besides like looking for the certification sources, or?
You know, well, first of all, most everyone probably really understands the struggle. Like it can be really hard. And especially depending upon the area that you're at, you might not have many choices at all or any, and it's far and few between. I do think trust your horse, because there are saddle fitters that will tell you, no, this fits, and it doesn't, and your horse is not improving and is still kind of fickle, and you know, all of that. So if you know your horse and they're not improving, then take a stand and get someone else. The other thing that I have found, I do know a couple names, but I don't necessarily want to hands down say like, I believe in this person.
I put Georgie there mostly because of the educational content. You know, is she the world's greatest saddle fitter? I don't know, you know, right. But I think she does a good job, and she is also like, she works for one of those organizations. It might be the British one. I'm not sure. And I think she educates other saddle fitters. Yeah.
I will say if a saddle fitter refuses, some saddles cannot be adjusted by other people, but if most saddles can, and if a saddle fitter who represents a company refuses to adjust your saddle, that's not their brand, chances are you will not get honest information from them. Most saddle fitters should be able to say that style of tree does or does not fit, and here are other styles in different brands, if you really push them. And you do have to, I mean, be polite, of course, but you do have to be the advocate for your horse at times, and that's okay. You know, they should be able to say like, well, this one fits your horse. If you can't afford it, keep an eye out for such and such and such and such. And, you know, call me back if you find one, and then we can fit it. You know, that's another kind of tactic I use to see. And then also someone wrote in there, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good fitting saddle. And that is true. Every new saddle that comes out is not necessarily better for your horse or you. There are some old counties that I'm in love with. Do they fit everybody? No, you know, so keep that in mind. Used saddles are out there aplenty, and there are a lot of options and a lot of tree shapes, and it can be difficult, but it's worth it if you can keep up the fight.
We'll have to get someone to give a saddle fitting talk, Megan. That's it's a whole topic.
Oh, I know. That'd be great.
All right. Any other questions, or we're good?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we have to do the like desk cat cameo before we say goodbye.
Yes.
She's been hanging out here the whole time, not stepping on the keyboard like a good cat,
Aw.
actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very
there she
good.
is. Now she's gonna step on the mouse. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really had fun putting that together. Thank you, Andrea, so much. And
Thank you.
if everybody loved Andrea, we can sweet talk her into giving a talk just on massage specifically. Maybe that's my mission. She survived this one, so we might be able to get her again.
Yeah. Great. Great.
All right.
Well,
All right.
yeah, thank you guys for presenting. That was fabulous. And as always, I'll have the recording up within 48 hours or so. And so that'll be posted on the Facebook page and all over my Instagram and just as much as possible. And yeah, if you subscribe on YouTube, you will get the link first because I put it up there and then I usually walk away. And so you'll get notified that it's online. But yeah, so great. I'm going to stop the recording.